Okay, Charlie, fifth and final tip, please.
Sure. So my final one, it was a huge one for me, actually, improving my teaching. It's to study the teachers you respect. Now, what I mean by that is in quite a practical sense, in that I'm sure, so in Michaela, it's the case that I am constantly, and I'm so lucky for this, surrounded by world-class teachers that I can go and watch at any time and learn from. And I'm so lucky for that. And in the early days that I joined the school, I used to walk around the building just kind of laughing at how ridiculous it was that I would get to see these kind of, best in the world teaching moments happening everywhere. And you can walk into any classroom and just the standard is so high, it's ridiculous. And you could study anyone in the building and you would get better at teaching. Now, I think it is the case that in any school that you go to, you will also have sort of at least pockets of brilliance happening. And I'm sure that anyone listening will be able to think in their school of the teachers that they really respect and the teachers who they think really teach lessons brilliantly. Now, what you need to do, and this is so important, you need to get into those teachers' rooms and you need to just study every little detail of what it is they're doing. I used to go into teachers' rooms and we do it over email. We have a sort of feedback system. I would open up, an email and I'd just be writing down almost a transcript of a lesson of everything that's happening. I'd be saying, okay, said this, did this with their body, did this with their voice, looked at this kid in this way, tried to portray this emotion, explain this thing in this way, use this little memory device. And I would just write the transcript down of what I was seeing in front of me, and that really focuses the mind on how is this person producing this magic in this room. Because you can walk into a classroom and, Catherine talks about watching Federer play tennis. It can look like Federer playing tennis or Messi playing football, and you just think, well, they're just kind of a genius, and this is just sort of this God-given ability they have. But the thing with teaching, and this is probably true of sport as well, is that if you study it, if you really think to yourself, what exactly is this person doing to create this atmosphere in this room, to get what they're getting out of the kids right now, you can actually boil it down to a kind of set of almost rules and principles or of kind of tips that you can follow in your own classroom, and then you go back to your own classroom and you try and embody some of that. Now, of course, in the beginning, you're going to be doing a little bit of a mimicking act as you kind of find your feet in what style works for you. And then what you find is, over time, you kind of settle into what version of you fits in with all the things you've seen. Now, of course, you can't be Messi, you can't be Federer. You're not trying to be that person. You're just trying to take some of the essence of what they do brilliantly and convert that into how can you produce that into brilliant teaching. And just the final thing I'll say on that is that then a huge part of that is to try and get those people, if you can, to come and watch you teaching and to give you feedback on how you're doing that and whether you're getting it right. Because it's very hard to see yourself through your own eyes. You can film yourself. That's a great thing to do. We film ourselves off when we get other people to film us. And, I remember in the early days of me teaching here, I was shown footage of myself teaching that was so painful to watch, but was so important in showing me, what I was getting wrong and what could I do differently. And I'm very grateful for that now. And it's so important.
It's brilliant, this, Charlie. Just 3 points on that. So we'll start with the video, because that was one of the things I was going to ask you. So would this be a regular part of kind of CPD and stuff at Michaela, watching clips of other teachers doing things well, or is it more kind of on a more kind of ad hoc basis if you happen to be focusing on something? What role does video play?
Yeah, so video does sometimes play a role. I would say it's not constant. It often depends on what we're talking about as a whole school CPD, but it will sometimes be the case that if one of the members of the senior team is presenting on a particular piece of a particular aspect of teaching, that they will have gone around and filmed some of the staff who do that really, really well, and then we'll all watch it through and we'll talk about it. And that's obviously really useful CPD, as well as I mentioned before, filming yourself and seeing what's happening with yourself. And, what we do a little bit of is just filming of each other, and then you might run it through with the person that filmed it and just say, oh yeah, I really liked how you did this bit, maybe that bit could have been better. And obviously that can be a bit difficult to watch yourself in the beginning, but if fundamentally you want to improve yourself as a teacher, then it's going to be worth it in the end. And one of the really wonderful things we have at Michaela is just a kind of low stakes feedback loop that's always going on where, it's a very open door policy and people are popping in and out, and you get friends and colleagues, and also sometimes, of course, your line manager popping in and saying, yeah, really like that part, this bit could have been a bit different, what do you think about this? And that kind of constant feedback just keeps you open to your kind of teaching blind spots, and makes you better.
It's great that. I've had myself filmed numerous times, and it's painful, isn't it, Charlie? Flipping heck. You think you're doing a good job till you watch yourself on film. Second question on this. One of the things I often find that goes wrong with lesson observations from an observer's point of view is if you don't go in with a focus. Whereas if a teacher says to me, I want you to come and watch me, and I want you to watch how I do whole class assessment, or I want you to watch how I model, and then I've got a specific focus, but it sounds to me like what you're doing is more of a general thing. Are you going in there just almost not having this focus and just trying to just see what you can see, or do you sometimes go in looking for something specific, if that makes sense? Yeah,
totally. It really depends on what it is that the position you're in the development of yourself as a teacher, because I would say that if you're not working on anything in particular, it's always brilliant to just walk in and see what's happening and then note the general. And I'd say particularly in the early days of, for me, working at Michaela, but for anyone listening, maybe just their teaching career in general, you do want to be quite general in your view of what is really good teaching, because you're not at the stage yet to be very, very specific. Now, having said that, of course, if a line manager or someone you respect has been telling you this particular element of your teaching isn't going so well at the moment, then of course you want to go and you want to focus on that thing. So for me in the early days, it's that I was very wooden when I was teaching. I wasn't showing a kind of range of emotion, and it was all a bit robotic. I went into full kind of robot Charlie mode, and that, it wasn't good, and it was kind of boring, and that's why the video was painful to watch. Now, I then was obviously going to members of staff who I really respected and I thought were doing a brilliant job, and I was kind of watching them and thinking, right, how are they avoiding being robotic? What is it that they're doing that means that they're not wooden and I'm being wooden? So obviously, yes, it's a good idea to be specific as well, but the general can also help. Brilliant. Final question on this, and it relates to that, Charlie. So what would be like a concrete thing that from one of these lesson observations you watched a teacher do that you thought, all right, okay, and you made a note of it, and then that was something you could enact? Now, whether that's something to do with stopping being wooden, as you say, or something else, what would be an example of something that you got from one of these observations? Yeah, it's almost hard to describe to you, because it is essentially my entire teaching persona that I have taken from other people. So it's difficult for me to boil it down into atoms when it is all of what makes me up over kind of the 4 or 5 years that I've been at Michaela, watching other brilliant teachers, learning as much as I can from them. Now, I'll just give you a small example of something that I just thought of the other day, and when I was talking to this teacher, I once saw a really excellent member of staff. There was a kid who tried. It was a lower ability kid, tried to say something to the teacher, and you've probably had this experience. It just came out garbled. They were trying their best, and it came out garbled. And the teacher said, I know what it is that you're trying to say. Sort of, I know what's happening in your head, but we're not quite there yet. And then moved on to someone else. And I just thought that was a lovely way to, in a really warm, loving way, say to the pupil, you're not quite there, but I get what you're saying. And these days I teach a bottom set class, and I find myself using a phrase similar to that all the time. And that's just a tiny nugget of something I saw happen in a lesson. I thought, yeah, I like that. I'm taking that, and I've kind of been using it ever since. And as I say, all of what I do in Michaela classrooms are atoms of that. Lovely. That's fantastic.